Hello, BookTube. I have another book tag for you on this Tag Thursday. This is an original tag called the 10 Weird, Odd, Bookish Questions tag. I was tagged by its creator, Sean D. Standfast. I'll leave a link to his channel down below. You should subscribe if you haven't already. He is a very bookish person. And this is all about the weirdnesses of your encounters with books over the years. So question number one is, where was the oddest place you purchased a book from? And was it a keeper? I've purchased books in many, many, many places, but not as many odd places as you would think. Because I've done a huge amount of traveling in my life, but when I traveled, I was not a book buyer. I had a complement of books that I brought with me wherever I went. I realized right from the beginning, before I ever left the country, I realized that if I popped into bookstores and was an active book buyer when I was traveling, I would be building misery for myself in terms of lugging things around. So I didn't. I just shifted out of that mind frame completely. So one of the questions that book people often ask me when they hear about my travels is, oh, did you go to this bookstore or that bookstore? And my answer is always very disappointing. No, I never did. I wouldn't bother going in. But I do have an answer to this question. That it is fairly exotic. I was visiting Rabat, and I was with an old friend of mine, and the night of the day that I arrived, he told me that he had cancer, that he was dying of cancer. There wasn't anything that could be done, and that he didn't have very long to live. And it was amazing. It was an amazing revelation for me. It hit me like a freight train. And we still had, believe it or not, because we were so thoroughly bookish, such thoroughly bookish old friends, we still had an evening, a fun evening. And then the next day, he wanted to know what we could do, and I said, well, what I'd like to do is just have a normal day, as if that horrible thing is not hanging over us, as if we're just going to have a normal day. Would that be okay? And he smiled. He had a wonderful smile and said, nothing would please me more. So we went out and had a day, just a wandering around, two friends wandering around day. And at one point in that day, we went to a souk, and it was swarming with people. It was swarming with merchants and products of all sorts, every kind of thing. And he was very genially asking me over and over again, what about this? Are you interested in this? Or what about this? Do you need one of these? And I was telling him, I kept telling him, well, no, I'm traveling. My dogs and I are traveling, so we're moving on. We're not staying. So the last thing I want to do is accumulate things. And I remember at one point we were in this souk where it was a bright, sunny day. We were surrounded by people. Rabat is just wonderful. It is a wonderful, wonderful place. We were surrounded by people laughing and haggling and talking and whatnot. And I told him that. I said, you know, I'm mainly just window shopping, really, is what we call it in America, because I'm traveling. So I'm not staying here long, and I don't want to accumulate things. And I thoughtlessly said, but what about you? I mean, feel free to explore any corner that you want. He looked at me with wonderful, wise eyes and said, I too am traveling. I too am not accumulating things. It's a little bit heartbreaking, but I saw his point right away. And we were poking around, really. We weren't really interested in buying. But at one point, we both started to wonder if we were going to encounter any books in this particular market. And then we did. In the back corner of, I think it was a leather goods seller, had like a little shelf of books. Most of them were in French. And they weren't in very good shape. They were just in case somebody wants to buy a book. And there was on that little shelf, there was only one book that was in English. And it was by my friend. That struck us both. We both just reared back. What were the odds? What an incredible coincidence that in this one place, in this entire souk where we had found books, the one book that was in English, he had written years before. And the shopkeep immediately noticed our reaction. You don't keep a shop in such a place without having antennae that are razor sharp. He immediately noticed our reaction, came over, and immediately tried to start talking about books. This was a bad idea. He didn't know that. His heart was in the right place. But he was, unbeknownst to him, talking to two extremely bookish people. And he immediately started to talk about books and how these were the very finest, that he doesn't sell them to just anybody, but he can tell that we are fairly discriminating. That he would, hi Bean, how you doing? Ooh, what you doing? Ooh. Ooh. And my friend started to say, well, I appreciate that. I especially appreciate the compliment, since you are, unbeknownst to you, complimenting me. This is my book. And the shopkeeper at first thought we were accusing him of something. He at first thought that my friend was saying, this is mine, this book belongs to me, and you have no right to sell it. And he started to get just a touch on the defensive. Souk merchants in Morocco or anywhere else, it's tough to get them to be abrasive. The customer is everything. The customer is king. But he started to sort of excuse himself, defend himself. My friend elaborated that no, I don't mean that this is my property. I mean I wrote this book, which evoked almost supernatural awe, especially when my friend flipped it over and just sort of showed his own photograph to the shop owner, who was bowled away and was overjoyed. No force on earth, not the angel Gabriel coming to his stall and saying, I'm a little short on cash. No force on earth will make a souk merchant say, oh, well, in that case, you should have it. They absolutely will not do that. But he came close. You could see that he was tempted to say, oh, then please take it, sir. But that is probably the oddest place. I did buy that book. I did. Of course I did. I bought it. I had my friend sign it in front of the shop owner. And he made a comic little flourish of handing it to me. And I thought that it was a keeper, but that was a long time ago. And that book is long since gone. Probably eaten by a dog. But that I'm going to say that is the oddest place where I've ever purchased a book. Not so much because of the place, is because of the circumstance. It was just an amazing coincidence. And the next time that I visited Rabat, he was long gone. My friend was long gone. Just a little sad codicil. So let's move on to question number 2. Have you read a book in public that had a title which can be interpreted in different ways and got strange looks? And not so much a title here as an appearance, because as you all know, I love Regency romances, especially old-fashioned Regency romances with the painted covers from Signet and Zebra. And I have pretty much always looked like this. I've always looked like a battered, slightly brighter than normal Boston beat cop. So when I am standing on a crowded subway car, back when crowded subway cars existed, and I pull out a Regency romance and dive right into reading it, nose in the book, that gets looks. Even I have noticed that gets looks. I don't care at all. I don't, as I often say, I don't have much occasion to say it on this channel anymore, but as I often say to bookish people in real life, your book snobbery is not my problem. And if you look at that or a lurid sci-fi cover or whatever, and you think, oh, well, I guess that's the kind of a reader you are, once again, I mild-manneredly propose, if you're going to be the kind of condescending a-hole that starts to think that based on the cover of a book, let's compare reading. Perfectly happy to do that. I am as accessible as readers get. I am not a condescending reader myself. But I don't suffer condescension well, and I stack my brain against yours any day. So, that often happened, where I would get strange looks because I pulled out a Regency romance or something like that. I want to stress, I know it's useless here, because here in this enclave of book lovers, there are almost no ebook lovers, but I want to stress that doesn't happen with ebooks. Nobody knows what you're reading when you're reading an ebook. You don't get any looks one way or another. You don't get any drunks coming up to you and saying, oh, I read that. Oh, awesome. You don't get anything like that when you're reading ebooks. And you don't have to lug them anywhere, and this holds 1,000 of them. I just thought I'd speak up for the ebooks, that's all. If any of you know of booktube channels where the booktuber makes a point of loving ebooks, I'd love to know about those channels so I don't feel quite so alone. Question number 3 is, what strange and wonderful things have you found in a used or new book? Uh, and I have all of the usual things. I've talked about them on this channel before. I found money in many denominations. I found ticket stubs, uh, uh, recipes, little hand-drawn maps, all that sort of stuff. Probably one of the strangest things that I found in a used book was it was a big hardcover natural history, an old like 100-year-old natural history. It wasn't Wood's natural history, but it was of a type with that. And I thought, well, it's dirt cheap, and I might like just the illustrations. I won't. The information will all have been superseded, and a lot of the animals will be extinct. But I might like the illustrations. It's dirt cheap. Why don't I just page through it a little? And I was paging through it a little, and then I realized that the back chunk, the back 100 pages, had been glued together, and then someone had carved out an opening inside those back 100 pages. Obviously for something to go in back there. Only there wasn't anything in that opening, that hole in those back pages, except a note. There was a note pressed to the back of it that said, "You'll probably need this." But I have no idea what the thing was that was in there. Oh, the story behind it. That obviously you're trying to conceal this from somebody. Obviously you're trying to pass on something that someone might need with a note under the eyes of people who don't want that person to have that something. I would love to know the story behind it, and I never will. I never will. So that is probably one of the strangest things that I've found. Question number 4 is smelling a book weird to you or a normal part of book buying / reading? And I had to laugh at Mark's answer to this question. Just the soul of New England practicality. Because, of course, the question is referring to what Sean might not have meant it to refer to it, but every booktuber, almost every booktuber who reads this question is going to think about those insufferable book sniffers that we've encountered ever since the rise of the ebook. The smell of old books. How I wish it was a cologne. Oh, how transporting. I hate those people so much. If that's your objection to switching to ebooks, that you'll miss the smell of your books, I might hazard to point out that you've never really liked books at all. But one way or another, Mark, that reading of this question is what sailed right by him. Instead, it was, "Oh, you'd better smell the book. You tell a lot about it. You don't want any mildew in your library." I don't care at all about the smell of books, one way or another. Question number 5. Do you have any odd or weird book buying or reading or collecting habits? Not really collecting. I don't really collect books, except, for instance, if I really love an imprint like Penguin Classics. And even there, I'm not collecting, I'd like to think, because I won't put a book in that Penguin wall just because it's a Penguin. Now, in the course of my daily Penguin, I am learning that some of them have crept in that way. But mainly what I want is to like all the books on that wall, or in any other format, those modern libraries up there. I want to, if I start to accumulate a certain format, I want to like the books that are in it. So it's not really collecting, but in terms of buying, I have a little ritual that I've indulged in for 50, 60 years at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston. It's a used bookstore. It's a terrific place, full of 3 stories of used books, all reasonably priced on every subject under the sun, with a large amount of turnover. And in addition to that, there's a sale lot outside that has thousands more books for $1, $3, and $5. And when you get to the sale lot, the typical progression for the folks at the Brattle putting books in the lot is that they'll start the book off at $5. And then they keep an eye on the lot, and they're constantly rotating those books, and eventually that goes to $3. And then eventually that same book will go to $1. And in the back of the lot, there's a dumpster for the books that can't sell even at $1. And over the years, sometimes, especially when I used to go to the Brattle every day, I would make a kind of mental game out of watching the $5 books, some of them, and seeing whether or not I could trace them all the way to being $1 books. Not to any point. $5 is not that much to pay for a book. So if I saw a $5 book that I really wanted, I would just grab it. Because there's a lot of there was, before the plague, a lot of foot traffic at the Brattle, and you never know if you're going to see the same thing when you go back a second time. So if I wanted the book, then I didn't do that game. But I would watch with some books that I didn't so much want. Some books where I'd say, well, I'd pay $1 for it, but I don't want to pay $5 for it. And I wonder if it will get all the way to $1. the days will pass, people will handle it and put it back, and it will still make its way all the way to the back of the lot. So I don't know if that counts for this, but it's the only thing I can think of. Question number 6 is, what is the oddest comment you have received after telling someone you are a book collector or a reader? And Mark Richardson, again, I watched his version of this tag, and he mentioned that the stereotypical thing, the thing that every book person has heard, I'm sure, is for somebody to come into your home, look at all of your books, and say, "Have you read all these?" And I never quite know how to answer that. If a lot of you commented when I did my library tour last year, that it wasn't the same as a lot of library tours that you had watched on BookTube, because it seemed like I had read virtually every book in the library, and that's just a personal predilection. That's absolutely true. I tend only to keep books once I've read them. The exception to that is my forthcoming books, my advanced readers copies. A lot of those I haven't read yet. But when I'm talking about giving a book shelf space wherever I live, that's usually a book that I've read and want to keep. So when somebody comes to Hyde Cottage or wherever and looks at the books and says, "Have you read all these?" my answer tends to be, "Yeah, I have, and I'd love to talk about them," that sort of thing. But another comment that I've had when I'm out and about, used to be when I was out and about, and I would mention that I am a big reader, that I love to read, or that I'm a book critic. Another comment that I would get, I've had it from a few people, so it's not just one-off, that I just baffles me, is for people to suddenly stop and say, "Oh, I guess I better watch my grammar then." I've never quite understood that when I tell people I'm a writer and they say, "I guess I better watch my grammar then," I've never really got that. And a couple of times I've been so put out by the inanity of it that I've actually said, "Well, no, you'd only have to watch your grammar if I were a rude writer." Only a rude person points things out, just to make the other person feel dumb. And first of all, I don't know why you'd say that anyway. I've known lots and lots of writers in my life, and most of them were bone ignorant when it came to grammar and syntax. So I don't get that at all. I think it's just people make an instinctive mental grab for the closest thing that's word related. But I get that, or used to. And then question number 7, describe a strange encounter at a bookshop, either with a bookseller or a customer. And my strangest encounter involves neither a bookseller nor a customer. There used to be a used bookstore a little ways out from Boston, a little ways out from Kenmore Square, a little ways out, just a minute away from Fenway Park, called Boston Book Annex. There was a good used bookstore that had, in addition to the shelves and shelves of used books, it also had a little bargain room where the books were $3 for $1 or $5 for $1, where they were just dumped in there. And there was a fair amount of turnover in that little bargain room. And whenever I was out in that direction, or whenever I was near, for a long time, Open Letters Monthly, the online literary journal where I was the managing editor, for a long time, we had a post office box in Kenmore Square, a minute away from the Boston Book Annex. I shudder to look back on the days when I had to troop out in all weathers to a post office box on the other side of town to collect books, and then lug them back. And there were days, plenty, where I had no muscular teenagers. I was just doing that on my own. I shudder to think of that. But often was the case that when I was there, I would walk over to the Boston Book Annex and see what was what. And one time, I was in that bargain room. I had absolutely no calls on my attention. My dogs at the time were old, but not sick. So I knew perfectly well that once I settled them for the early afternoon, they were going to sleep soundly, like logs, until sunset. And it wasn't going to matter if I was there or not. There weren't younger dogs who were sleeping but would periodically wake up just to watch, just to make sure I was still there. No, they were going to be comatose, totally unaware of whether I was home or not. That gave me freedom to wander around, to go out and about, to do errands out in the world. And I was at the Boston Book Annex on such a day, and I had no calls on my time at all. None. So when I was in the bargain room there, and it was crammed with books, just crammed, at one point I sat down on the floor. to get at the books on the very bottom shelf, to pull them out and examine them at my leisure. A rare experience for me. Usually I've got plenty of places to go and don't feel like I have the leisure to just stay and browse. And I was absorbed in a book on that bottom shelf when suddenly I had company. The cat, who lived at the Boston Book Annex, walked into the room, walked up to me, and without so much as a by your leave, walked into my lap. I was sitting with my legs crossed. Walked into the well of my legs, settled itself in that depression, started going, and then started to fall asleep. To this day, I am dumbfounded by that encounter. I don't know what on earth. I must smell like a dog. And I'm not saying that I don't have good hygiene, no matter what Brian at Bookish says. I shower liberally, but I must smell like a dog in every root and follicle. And yet this cat didn't hesitate. As to the rumor that has been going around ever since, that once the cat was settled and was purring comfortably, I started to stroke its back and head, maybe even murmur to it. I strenuously deny that rumor. Let's just move on, shall we? Question number 8 is it weird to pass a bookshop when you are out and about and not enter? I, in my life, have never done that when I was in America. When I was traveling, I never went anywhere near bookshops because I didn't want to accumulate books. But otherwise, when I'm out and about on my own time in America, when I'm not traveling, when I have a bag or muscular teenagers who I can load like beasts of burden, then I don't pass by a bookstore, especially if I know that they have a remainder section or used section or periodicals. Then I go in every time. Question number 9. Are you drawn to weird or odd little dingy out-of-the-way bookshops, or do you prefer tidy bookshops? I don't mind at all if a bookshop is messy, but keep in mind, well, you don't have to keep it in mind, especially if you don't know it. If you're new to the channel, you won't know. I don't drive. Never sat behind the wheel of a car in my life. So dingy little out-of-the-way used bookstores are a treat to me because I have to be brought to them. I ordinarily can't get to them on my own. There was one in Boston. It rotated, it had a couple of different locations. I'm not sure that it even still exists. It was called Discovery with a K. And it was a rabbit warren. Oh my God. You need, talk about having time on your hands. You needed that time at Discovery in order to literally shovel huge mountains of books away from other mountains of books in order to see everything. It used to be that if I was there with a friend, if we started out, I'd feel like I had to roll up my sleeves ahead of time because I wanted to see every book in the store. And that took some time. It was always fun, but it took some time. I would say that I prefer it. For instance, the Brattle Bookshop, the aforementioned Brattle Bookshop, is easily my favorite used bookstore in the world. And the inside of the Brattle Bookshop is organized to fairly well. It's easy to find things. If it's there, it's going to take you 2 seconds to find out whether or not a book is actually in the store. The counterpoint to that is the outside sale lot, which is not organized at all except by price. So there, you don't know what you're going to encounter anywhere. But I don't know that I terribly prefer. What if it's a used bookstore? That I'm not really expecting it to be able to just snap me a book when I ask for it. I'm expecting. For me, a large part of the fun of a used bookstore is the thrill of the hunt, the serendipity of finding something when you didn't expect it. So disorder goes a long way towards helping with that. And question number 10 is, books come in odd shapes and sizes. What is the oddest shape book that you have come across? I don't know if it's the oddest shape, but for me, the answer that comes out is, that sticks out in my mind is Madonna's sex book, which was a photography collection, mildly salacious photos, that was bound in metal covers, spiral bound in metal covers. And I was working in a bookstore when that book came out, and it presented us with several logistical challenges. Well, how do you stack such a thing? How do you move such a thing around on V-carts or by hand or whatever? What do you do with such a thing? Probably the funniest moment that came about as a result of the Madonna sex book was a customer inevitably trying to shoplift one by stiffing it down his pants. I thought, Oh, come on. I mean, the metal detector tags that stores put in books might not always work, but you can pretty much count on 2 metal covers setting off a detector at the front of the store. To say nothing of the fact that there's no medical condition you could have that would make you look that way, that would simulate the outline of a barn door sized metal hinged thing in your pants. The customer that we stopped, I happened to be present. I happened to be there when our security guard stopped him, and told him to take the book out of his pants and said, this store has a strict policy. We are going to prosecute you. And he said, I was just bringing it to the registers. That was, as a last minute defense, I thought that was fairly valiant. I didn't want to carry it. It was a little heavy. So I put it in the nearest receptacle, but I was just going to waddle to the registers with it. And of course, now, in the 21st century, if the security guard were to say, well, okay, you're on camera, you have this thing stuffed down your pants, you're obviously shoplifting it, so we're going to prosecute you, so come with me back to the office while we call the police, that security guard and the whole store would be sued. Barnes & Noble now is under such unbelievably ridiculous restrictions in terms of shoplifters. You can't accuse them of anything. You can't call them anything. You can't accost them while they're still in the store. You can't do anything like that. All this common sense stuff. You have to pretty much wait for them to successfully steal something from the store and then hope that mall security or the police get them while they're still within running distance of your front door. Otherwise, you just lose that product. But for me, it would be the Madonna sex book. And, as much as I don't really care what Madonna did to Vanilla Ice and how often he was willing, I still wish kind of sometimes that I had a copy of that book. But anyway, that is the 10 odd or weird bookish questions book tag, which Sean made, which I love. And all that's left for me to do is tag people. I don't know if these people have been tagged on this or not, but I want to tag some people and see. I'll tag Christy Lewis at Dostoevsky in Space. Tag the guys at the Codex Cantina. They must have some book stories. Scally Dandling about the books. Who knows? Tell us your weird, odd book stories. The Bookish Knitter. Of course, my sister from another mister. What's your book shopping outre stories? And of course, Britta. Maybe you have some book buying stories. But anyway, that's it. That is the 10 odd weird bookish questions book tag. And I'm gonna wrap this up. So once I've gone long, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.